Hello and welcome to the American Labor Museum. I'm Evelyn Hershey, and this short video is our lesson for today's Saturday labor art class for 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. Today is November 7th, and we're going to need for our project a piece of paper, blank piece of paper with lines is really helpful, and a pencil because our project is going to be to write a speech and to recite it or deliver it. It's really important to learn how to speak on a stage like an actor. That's a performing arts task. And the way we do that when we're on a stage is we make sure that we make eye contact with the audience, to those to whom we are speaking. We speak clearly, and that means pronouncing each word separately as best we can in a loud enough voice so that people can hear us. And when we speak, we are sure to speak a little bit slower than we would if we were reading to ourselves. So slow down a little so that people, when they listen to your words, can understand them. So what is our speech going to be about? Well, we are going to imagine we are workers called Newsies. So what is a newsie? Well, you may have at home and seen people read, or you may have read yourself, newspapers. 100 years ago, it was the way people got their news. They didn't have television or couldn't use the internet to find out what was happening in their community and in the world. So they used newspapers. And Newsies is the nickname for the boys who sold those newspapers on the street. So our story is inspired by an event that happened. It's a true story. This book, written by Don Brown, tells the story of a strike of Newsies that took place over 100 years ago. And I'm going to read from the book to you. So listen to the story and the words of the Newsies in the story and the issues of their struggle and their strike. The title of the book again is Kid Blink Beats the World by Don Brown. The book starts, "It was all for a penny." It was all for a penny. They left their cramped and crowded tenement apartments for a penny. They scurried beside the pushcart peddlers for a penny. They dodged street trolleys and horse-drawn wagons for a penny. And in the summer of 1899, Kid Blink, Racetrack Higgins, Tiny Tim, Crutch Morris, and Crazy Arborn battled the world for a penny. The boys were Newsies. They and thousands of youngsters like them peddled the World and the Journal newspapers on the streets of New York City, a penny a paper. They bought stacks of papers, 5 cents for every 10 copies, and then hawked them to passers-by. The trick was to sell them all and not to be left with unsold papers. Extra, extra, read all about it. Ship sinks, bridge collapses. At the end of the day, the scores of sold copies later, a newsie might have made 25 cents, a generous wage in a time when a family survived on $10 a week, and 15 cents fetched a dinner of soup, stew, and pie. But then 2 of the most popular papers, the World and the Journal, demanded that the Newsies pay more for their stacks, 6 cents for 10 papers. Their powerful owners, Mr. Pulitzer and Mr. Hearst, reckoned by doing so they could wring more money from their businesses and for themselves. And in the end, making money, more money, was the object of their labors. So here's a newsie at work on the streets selling newspapers. Extra, extra, read all about it. For a penny, you could get a newspaper. And if a newsboy sold all of his papers, he would get his money back plus half a penny per paper. That's how they made money. But the money difference angered the Newsies, for they understood that an extra penny for the newspaper was a penny less to them. Kid Blink said, 10 cents in a dollar is as much to us as it is to Hearst and Pulitzer, who are millionaires. I'm trying to figure out how 10 cents on 100 papers can mean more to a millionaire than it does to a newsboy, and I can't see it. If they can't spare it, how can we? It was only a penny, but the young boys wouldn't have it. So they decided to strike and stop selling copies of the World and the Journal until the price was rolled back. 300 Newsies rallied on July 20th near the newspaper's offices in Lower Manhattan and tried to stop the delivery of the papers. But the police scattered the youngsters, took a few to jail, and the papers still got out. The bosses of the World ignored the demands of the youthful news peddlers. We have the situation well in hand, they said. But uptown, hundreds of Newsies heard of the strike. They decorated lampposts with banners that read, "Please don't buy the World," and "The Journal," and "Our cause is just. We will fight for our rights." When the newspaper delivery wagons arrived, Newsies surrounded them and with hoots and howls drove off the delivery men and trampled the newspapers. Uh-oh, what's going to happen? No newspapers to be sold, and one scared delivery horse. These boys are determined. That night, Kid Blink told a mob of Newsies, "The time has come when we must either make a stand or be downtrodden by the greed of the newspaper bosses. Are you still with me?" he said to the Newsies. "Sure, sure," the crowd cheered. The next day, Newsies wore signs on their hats and handed out leaflets begging people not to buy the World and the Journal. They stopped newspaper deliveries, pummeled delivery men with rotten fruit, and swiped papers from the few kids and newsstands that still sold the papers. They decided to have a parade. Other Newsies had joined them. Harlem, Brooklyn, Staten Island Newsies joined the strike, as did those in Newark and Jersey City, New Jersey. The strikers planned a huge parade across the Brooklyn Bridge. Racetrack Higgins visited Chief of Police Devery for a permit. "Go away, you slob," the chief said. "Mr. Devery, don't call me a slob. I'm trying to make my living. I'm not so high in office as you, but someday I might be higher," Racetrack replied. The chief was unmoved, and the parade, for the time being, was not held. Instead, on the evening of July 24th, the Newsies gathered at the new Irving Hall on Broome Street, a neighborhood of tenements teeming with immigrant families, a neighborhood said to be one of the most crowded on earth. 5,000 Newsies, many of them the children of those immigrants, filled the hall and swarmed the street outside. There were mad cheers and shouts for order. Visiting politicians applauded the strike. Newsies made speeches of encouragement. "Just stick together and we'll win," Kid Blink said. "Well, we'll all go out tomorrow and stick together, and we'll win," he said, and the crowd awarded him a giant flower horseshoe for his speech. And here's Kid Blink with that award around his neck. The Newsies continued to make sure that no newspapers were sold in New York City, which meant Mr. Pulitzer and Mr. Hearst were not earning money either from the sale of newspapers. The Newsy boys raided news wagons, and the papers were left in tatters. One downtown street was left awash in 6 inches of torn paper. Here are the Newsies. Permit or not, the Newsies paraded up the avenues in the hundreds. They avoided the police by running down the alleys to escape. Some of the boys were caught and went to jail. But the strike pinched newspaper sales, and the bosses moaned that they were losing money in an appalling and colossal way. Newsies in Rochester, Troy, and Yonkers, New York, Newark, Trenton, and Paterson, New Jersey, Providence, Rhode Island, New Haven, Connecticut, Fall River, Massachusetts, Cincinnati, Ohio, Lexington, Kentucky, all joined the strike. Messenger boys and shoeshine boys joined the strike in sympathy. In less than 2 weeks, nearly all the Newsies in New York City and adjacent towns had quit selling newspapers. The Newsies had won. But this unlikely strike had an unlikely ending. The World and the Journal didn't lower their price. Instead, they offered to buy back all copies of the newspaper the Newsies were unable to sell. It was neither a victory nor defeat, but something in between, a compromise. Clustered on the push carts of crowded streets, beside the trolleys and horse-drawn wagons, and in the shadow of the cramped tenements, the Newsies tallied the gains and losses the compromise offered. When their calculation pointed to more money in their pocket, they decided to accept the deal. And the Newsies knew that more pennies in their pocket meant more pennies for their families and a better life for all. And wasn't that what it was all for? That's what it was all for. The Newsies strike. The end. Our project today asks us to think about what it would be like to be a newsie, to think about Kid Blink as he gave his speech to 5,000 newsies, to inspire them to stand together, to win their strike for fair pay so that they could help their families. So take a few moments and think about the story, and with your pencil and paper, write down your speech. Can you think of 5 to 6 statements that you would make as a newsie to other striking newsies, to lift their spirits, to encourage them to carry on their struggle for fair pay? And then find somebody in your house who you can recite the speech to and practice your speaking skills. Remember, make eye contact with your audience, speak slowly, clearly, and with a loud voice, and enjoy giving your speech as a newsie. So thanks for joining me, and have fun writing and reciting your speech.